Hello and welcome to Audible Anomaly, the podcast where we foster deep and meaningful conversation to help get you through your darkest days. I'm your host, Josh, and in today's episodes, we are talking about all things related to higher education and whether or not it may be the right course for you to take. But before we get started, let's check in with my lovely friends. Let's go over to Kevin. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty well. Got my second dose of the vaccine.
Ooh.
And then took a day off because that knocked me on my butt. But all better now, so it's all good.
Yeah, that second dose can be pretty darn rough.
It can. That was not a fun day, but it's a small price to pay.
Yep, better than the alternative, that is for sure. But all right, Davey, how about you? How was your week?
My week was fine. A pretty typical work week, I feel. I don't think I really have anything to note. No, I guess not really a special week at all. How about you? Josh? How was your week?
Yeah, my week was pretty hectic. I was working on homework and had to do my final, so that was fun. As a result, and I apologize to everyone who follows us on the socials, I haven't really been keeping up with that just because my final was a lot of work. But now that I'm over it and finished with school, that's over with. So we are good to go in that regard. I did have commencement yesterday, so woo,
see how it is, not inviting us?
Yeah, you wouldn't have fit because they only allowed one car, and it was a drive-through commencement, and the seats were already full. So
trunk, man, come on, easy peasy.
Honestly, you didn't miss much because it really wasn't like anything spectacular.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was something. Obviously, not like the whole ordeal that you normally would get in regular years, but that's all right. It's only my associates. When I get my bachelor's, it'll be a proper thing again, so we'll be good. We'll celebrate proper that time,
Oh yeah.
But that's kind of what sparked the thought that, hey, we should talk about college and university and the idea of higher education as a whole, right? So I just want to, for our overseas friends, because it's a little bit different here in the US, we tend to use college and university, those terms, interchangeably. So I will try to stick to higher education. I cannot guarantee that I will throughout the entirety of this, just because we use college so much to refer to four-year universities that it's kind of ingrained in, and even when I was talking to people, about the topic and getting people's feedback, college was just the term that we used. So I apologize if there's any confusion, but when we're talking about college, when we're talking about university, we're talking about 4-year schools where we get our bachelor's. It might be 3-year in like the UK or somewhere else, but your bachelor's pretty much is what, or even graduate education is what we're talking about. Okay. So I figured while we're on the topic of this higher education, there's a lot of like issues that I've seen creeping up. And one of those that I keep seeing is this notion of college rankings, right? There's always these Ivy League schools, these really prestigious schools that, everyone wants to get into. And it really begs the question of, are these college rankings overrated? So I just want to get like your idea and your thoughts on that.
I mean, yes and no. I think individual spots, right, are probably a little overrated, but clearly certain schools are doing things right. And the fact of the matter is, there are some people who hire based off of the school you went to. They don't care about the degree. So it's almost like you're earning the status symbol by going to that like ranked school. And I mean, also there's the whole factor of this school has a great blah, blah, blah program. So, I mean, Harvard it's got a great law program. It's what it's known for. So going to Harvard alone for law purposes can be seen as such a benefit. and that's kind of where its high ranking comes from, is because it's a hard program already. So if you go to a school that's known for it and has good education and attracts better teachers, it can be a benefit in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like, there's especially like one of like our local colleges here in Southern California, Caltech, which is spawned out of students who were, uh, sorry, not Caltech didn't spawn out of it. JPL, the branch of NASA, spawned out of students that were experimenting at Caltech, and they decided to give them NASA decided to give them like their own campus to like mess around with rockets and stuff in a safer environment, which is kind of nuts. Like that might be an overgeneralization or oversimplification of it, but like that's always regarded as one of like the top uh, astronaut aero. What is the word I'm trying to look for?
Aerospace?
Thank you, that one. Word's hard today for me. I feel like it's going to be a continuing theme. But, so it's like a very good aerospace school, right? I know JPL is always looking at Caltech for places. And the reason I know that is because for a long time I wanted to be a rocket scientist. That didn't quite pan out, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So, I do see where you're coming from in that, like, yes, there are absolutely these schools that just happen to be doing things a little bit better. Yet, at least when I was in high school, I remember there was such like this, almost this like status symbol of like, oh, where are you going to college or university, right? And it's always like, you're always like, I always felt like it was a competition to like one up the other person, And it's like and we kind of saw that a little bit with what ended up becoming the college admission scandal, which was codenamed Operation Varsity Blues, and how these people who were in a position to be able to kind of buy their way into schools, they found themselves in this place where, so it's kind of weird because there technically is still a backdoor way to get into these colleges. You just have to fork over millions and millions of dollars. I mean, we're talking like $15 to $100 million to guarantee your acceptance. So kind of what was really nutty is that this guy, I believe his name is William Singer, was able to use sports because there's not as many eyeballs on it, but using sports and student athletes in order to get these people in to whatever college or university they wanted to go to. And I just think it's kind of crazy how here we are, right? If your goal is to try and get into like these top schools, there's like thousands and thousands of applicants applying to like the top 5 schools. Well, no crap, you're never going to get in. And then on top of it, you have that whole controversy of kind of getting around the other back door of, getting their way in via that way, which is kind of just mind-boggling to me. And that was kind of where the kind of question spurred from is like, we tend to fixate on this ranking and like, oh my God, is that number 1? Like, can I settle for my number 2 college? Like, probably, frankly, like you'll be fine in most cases. Like, unless like Davey said, like unless you're going to somewhere where they only hire from Harvard, then okay, maybe either A, don't try to get into that place that's hiring from just Harvard, or if you really want to get into Harvard, then I don't even know what to recommend. Find ways to get in. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Well, it can spark like desire in people, because I don't think ranking isn't inherently that bad. Because there's plenty of people who they make that decision of their mind of, I'm going to Harvard because Harvard is the best. That's what I'm told. And they put the work in, and they're going to make themselves better because of it, right? They have to build a better work ethic. They have to prove themselves to be worthy of it. I mean, all of the scandals aside, right? Normal people who get normally accepted into these universities clearly have to prove themselves. Mind you, there's outliers of that situation. There's special situations in which people get involved. But if we talk about the surface level of it all, right? If we're talking perfect world, we're talking people who only have worked hard enough to get there. And there are people who do that and they make their lives better because of it, whether or not they get into Harvard, right? They have worked towards proving themselves in that degree and have made themselves better people. So, it can spark inspiration and desire and a better work ethic for some people.
On the flip side of that, I know that like what happens to those who do all that, right? They work their fingers to the bone, almost sometimes literally. And what happens when they don't get it? I mean, we're seeing a lot of kids who are like they're adding just so much. I don't know if unnecessary is the right word, but this additional pressure onto themselves and this additional stress onto themselves of, oh, if I get in, great. And if I don't, I don't know what else I'm going to do. Just because there is this like inherent pressure, I feel like all over the place of you have to go to school. And what I think is kind of nuts is we have this social pressure, definitely. Yet we're still the generation that has gone to school more than any other previous generation in existence. I think the numbers are like for baby boomers, it's probably in like the 50% range, and our generation, the millennial generation, is about 71% of people are going to 4-year school. And I don't know if they're graduating as much. I don't know if that actually ties into that metric that I saw, but definitely it's attending and going to these 4-year colleges, which is kind of nuts that we're still like, that's not good enough, But yeah, what about you, Kevin? What are your thoughts here?
I think the ratings are important to a degree. Like stratification in general, like this is a top tier school, is very important. Help you figure out, one, if the accreditation is widely recognized, it's going to be highly rated. Or if it just deserves accreditation, probably going to be highly rated. If it's a low ranking school, might not be accredited by the professional standards, organizations, societies, whatever they are, that you would need to apply that degree in the workplace. But looking at like, the top 5, first through 5th, probably no difference there. You're fighting over fractions of a percentage of a difference. So I wouldn't worry about that. But the rankings in general are important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment of like, just look at tiers. Don't even look at like, I need to go to this school because it's the best. It's like, well, sometimes what makes the best is that they just end up paying someone off a little bit more to get higher up in the rankings. Like, not
Yeah.
all the time, but let's be honest, like if you have to think about it, who does being in the top 5 really benefit? It only makes logical sense that those schools that are in the top 5 benefits them the most. So naturally, they're gonna have a higher incentive to find a way, whether legal or illegal, to get themselves to the top. And it's like
Yep.
that much. I'm definitely not a fan of. Just because, I mean, for me from day one, like and we'll get into the stories here, but it's like I've always known that I was going to go to college at some point or university at some point. I just knew I didn't want to like add that additional pressure on myself because I saw it all around me, and I don't know. I was dealing with some other stuff that I thought was more important and would definitely help me grow more as a person than just attending this institution. Honestly, that's how I saw it. But yeah, if you haven't seen Operation Varsity Blues on Netflix, not a plug, not a sponsor, mind blowing, frankly. But yeah, don't know if either of you have anything else to add to the ranking in college. No. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we will move on. I do have another question, but I'm going to ask you from refraining from answering it until after we share our stories. Why? Because the question is, do you think most people should attend college/university? Should you pursue higher education? Why or why not? Now, I figured all three of us have very different kind of collegiate experiences, right? We've all had our own separate paths, if you will, through the higher education system. So I thought before we actually answer this question, we need a little bit more context for why we think the certain way that we think. So I thought it would be wise to first go around the room, the virtual room here, and we'll share our experiences. I'm not sure who wants to go first.
I'll jump in, sure. I've attended 2 community colleges, 2 two-year universities, and 2 universities, 2 four-year schools. So I went to university straight out of high school and then dropped out after a year. Took some time off, found myself, and then started going back to school. Went to community college, played around, figured out what I wanted to do. Went to another community college at the same time just to get a class that wasn't offered at the one, and then transferred into university again. Got my degree, have my bachelor's, and I'm out.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. What led to you dropping out the first time?
A lot of things. Poor mental health was the biggest one, though. So it just wasn't focusing on school. My grades tanked. I wasn't feeling good. So I gave it up.
Gotcha. And then obviously you kind of went through life and sorted out your woes to a degree. I don't know if they're fully, but
to a degree, yeah.
You got it to a point where you're able to then go back
Exactly.
and graduate. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to go again, Davey, or if you have any questions for Kevin.
Yeah. What was the pressure that you were feeling going into university the first time? Like, what was it like going from high school to the 4-year for you?
It was so much more freedom. Like, oh my goodness. My parents were always very involved in our education, trying to help us with my sister and I, trying to help us with homework, make sure that we were attending extracurricular activities, building up towards college and university. And then my sister attended higher education, but didn't follow through with it. So they saw that as perhaps, a failed opportunity or a lost opportunity, and focused on my education more. So it was a lot of pressure to do well while trying not to pressure me to do well, which didn't pan out. And my dad really wanted me to get a degree in a strong field. So I had initially thought, well, I'll study computer science. He says, no. There are jobs for that, but a lot of it's moving out of the States. Pick something that's a little more competitive, a little more, competitive, or less competitive. I don't know, a little more versatile. So he pushed me into electrical engineering instead, and that ended up being enjoyable. But a lot of pressure to succeed there. But so much more freedom.
Okay. So you found yourself kind of being pushed into your field, but happened to find that you love it.
Yeah, kind of. I had chosen my general field, and then he pushed me towards one specific path in that general area.
Yeah. Okay, so more of a focused. So you chose engineering, and he said focus on logical engineering, essentially.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like within technology, you've got like electrical engineering, computer science, computer engineering, and he pushed me towards electrical engineering.
Got it. Okay. So you picked technology. He kind of focused it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But you feel like that focus even still is something that you very much enjoy?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I only ask because I know a lot of people specifically have problems because they get pushed into a field
Mhm.
by outside forces and find themselves miserable.
Oh, yeah. A lot of engineering students are only going to school for engineering because their parents are willing to pay for engineering, but not something else.
Hmm.
I knew a couple of those students.
What was your focus the first time you went to university?
Hmm?
So when you first went right out of high school, did you have a plan? Was there a degree you were going for?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I immediately went in with a declared major, followed the plan. You know, they have these course plans. Take these courses your first semester, these courses your second semester, all the way through. Graduate in 4 years, no problem, as long as you pass all your courses.
What was your
So I was
declared
doing that.
major?
Electrical engineering.
Oh, well, okay. So you started electrical engineering, you dropped out, and then you just picked up where you left off, essentially, in community college.
Kind of. In community college, I actually went for electronics technology,
Okay.
which is like one step down from electrical engineering. This would be an engineer position. You get like a technician position.
Okay.
So instead of designing, you'd be like maintaining for oversimplification of it.
Yes.
But overall, no, sorry, just overall, your whole experience was within that kind of one field, that one study, essentially.
It was all in technology. So electronics technology was more
Sure.
like computer repair and maintenance, server repair and maintenance, robotics, that sort of thing. More applied science. And then I played around a lot too. Studied horticulture, 3D modeling, architecture.
I mean, you need those general eds, so you might as well have fun with it.
They didn't even fulfill general ed requirements half the time. I was just like, this sounds interesting.
Mm,
So I'll give it a shot. See if this is actually where my passion lies.
that's cool.
Mm.
That's a very fun way to use schooling.
Yeah. I mean, $40 a unit. Classes are typically like 3 units. It's $120 to figure out if you like a career option. Seemed worth it.
And are you like how is payment for school? Is it all loans for you? Is it out of pocket? What did your parents help? What is that situation for you?
My parents helped.
Okay.
But a lot of it was just out of pocket.
Out of pocket. Okay,
Yeah. So they helped me
you are not
more. Initially, first year at university, they paid for tuition and dorms. And then through community college, they paid for all of that tuition. And I was living at home again, so dorms as well, I suppose. And then they paid for most of my second term in university.
okay. So you are currently without debt for schooling.
Correct.
Awesome.
It is something that not a lot of people can say, and we'll get into the statistics later. I do have some statistics lined up.
Good for you. Those are rough numbers, man.
Oh,
Most people are on like loans, which is helpful, but like, oof.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into that conversation a little bit later. Because yeah, I have those numbers pulled up.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else for cross examination here, so I rest my case.
I think we painted a pretty good picture of Kevin's school life
Yeah,
overall as an overall arc.
yeah, absolutely. All right, you want to go next, or shall I
Mine's short.
go for it?
So, when I left high school, I had to make a choice of where I wanted to do for schooling because there was a lot of pressure from my parents. I wanted to go to school for acting, but it's kind of pointless. And I was told from everyone I know it's pointless. Why would you go to school for acting? They wanted me to go to school for cooking. I didn't want to. And so I made the choice to go to school for game design. So I went to DeVry, which was a colossal mistake. I am not a good student. I love learning, hate homework, great at tests, but rather not go to class. So I spent a year there. I think I passed maybe 1 or 2 classes, but it's an accelerated learning program. So instead of 16 weeks of class, it's 8 weeks of class, and it's rough. It's hard. It's a lot of work, and honestly, they don't teach you a lot. So it was just kind of pointless to me. I saw it as pointless. I dropped out after a year. This being completely funded by a trust my grandpa left after he passed. I took maybe 2 years off, 3 years off, and then I went back to a community college. I think I took 2 classes, and then I never took another class. So I have like 0 education basically under my belt. I am kind of right out of high school with a high school degree, and I have been working since the age of 19, full 40 hours, and I haven't stopped. So, my entire career path is strictly made from job to job to job to job. So,
and I know we've talked about this, I think, before, even on the podcast.
mhm.
For you, there really isn't any aspiration to go back to pursue higher education, nor do you see a need in it for you personally.
For me, no, because if there was there'd only be 2 things that I would go back to school for, maybe 3. Acting, but you don't need a degree to act. It really is experience. Honestly, it's like you go to school to get the experience, but like I have tons of experience, and I can absolutely equate it to more things. Auditions are the only thing that matter for acting. Technical stuff, but honestly, if I was going to go into a technical field, I would be getting certifications. I would be getting my CCNAs, my CCNPs, stuff like that, strictly focused in networking. Or I'd go back for like video production. But then again, I'm going to get experience on the field and work towards knowledge through practical means, and that's just how I am. I am a hands-on kind of guy. That's how I learn. I'm better just to sit here, make something, and mess with programs. So for me, no. There's no, maybe 1 or 2 classes for the odds and ends, but I really don't see it happening.
Not even like a trade school for, say, video production?
No.
There's no point. Everyone that I've talked to, and the multiple times that I've been on sets and talked to like actual production, it really is just a matter of like where you will learn on set. I will learn more about Adobe Premiere or Adobe After Effects by messing around with it. Honestly, I will learn more about lighting and camera setup and all of that by being in the field, talking to the right people, and messing around with it. And a lot of stuff for like video production in Hollywood, a lot of people benefit from that more.
So, especially with where it comes in regards to like that, I feel like it's a lot of it you learn theory, and you don't really actually learn so much how to do what you do until you just start doing it and practicing it and messing with it.
Yeah. I think that the people who really benefit from it are directors of photography, or anything strictly technical, like basically the engineers on set.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
But
But from
you know,
what you want to do, which is more performance based.
and the only reason I wanted to learn any video production is to mainly do small time production stuff for like YouTube or whatever. I'm not here to make Hollywood films, you know? I would act in Hollywood films. I don't know if I'm in the production team for that though.
Bollywood, though.
Now we're
No.
talking.
Well, that you need to practice your After Effects for.
And my dancing.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah, mine mine's always a long story, I feel. So for me, straight out of high school, yes, there was always that pressure from my mom. She's like, "Yeah, you should go for your degree," cuz to be fair, I'm the kind of person that like just knows too much and like has a bunch of useless information. So I guess like she's just wanted me to like go out and like learn because I have a good memory and remember random things, and she figured I'd be good at it. And for what it's worth, I do enjoy like the tech and such, and that's like I said, part of where we all kind of related on and grew closer together, over our bond of tech. So for me, I originally wanted to do like rocket science was like my thing, just because I love the idea of astronomy and stuff, and it's mind blowing that as I look up, I see millions and millions of stars, and like that just is fascinating to me. So what the process that came about was like, oh, okay, maybe I don't necessarily want to do rocket science per se, but mechanical engineering. It's almost like this version or this avenue that's a little bit more generic, but can be applied in a lot of different ways. So that way I'm not just tied to one thing if for whatever reason I end up doing it doesn't work out. So coming out of high school, I was dealing with a lot of like mental health woes and stuff. So my grades were absolutely awful. So I knew straight out of the gate, I'm not going to 4-year right out of high school, even though all my friends and everyone were, and I was still in like the AP classes and doing the whole thing just because kind of what you're told to do, right? So you have that crazy pressure. So for me, I ended up knowing that that's not going to happen. So I started looking at the next best thing, which is the 2-year college, the junior college. So I ended up procrastinating a little bit too long, because what ended up happening was I ended up working at the job that we all met, right, for almost 3 years. And then I didn't have much money to really drive myself to campus. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to save up some money still. And ended up kind of just doing work and was working for a little bit. And it took me probably 4, maybe 5 years of right after high school to work to where I finally said, okay, enough's enough. I got to go to college because I feel like I'm procrastinating at this point now. Right. So I go in, and again, I knew I was doing the 2-year thing just because it's a hell of a lot cheaper. And in retrospect, honestly, I think it was the absolute best decision I've ever made, just because of what ended up transpiring. So I go in, I knew right out of the gate, I'm like, okay, I'm mechanical engineering. That's kind of my focus, but I was already starting to have some doubts, but I'm like, you know what, I haven't actually tried it. Let me actually go for it. So I started taking a bunch of general eds and a bunch of math classes because you need a lot of math. So it was around 3rd-year calculus, which I believe is multivariable calculus, that I'm sitting there and I'm like, look, I can sit here and do this, right? I can remember all this stuff, all these equations, all this math, but I started noticing in myself that I started becoming a lot more, I don't know what's the word, not, I guess, grumpy, for lack of a better term. And I just stopped enjoying it as much as I was. Like, I remember taking like college algebra and trigonometry in the same semester, and I'm like, this is easy. I love this. Like, this is like, it's all coming back to me, and it was great and it was fun times. And then, yes, it got harder, and sure, I knew it was going to get harder. Like, I'm not afraid of a challenge. It no longer, when I was overcoming those challenges, it no longer was as satisfying as it was. It just seemed more like I was grinding to grind, and I'm not that kind of person. Just like, it felt like I was starting to just fall out of love with it. So it was weird because obviously, like, my mom, she wanted me to go down that path. And I realized, especially in the podcast, a couple of times I feel like I've almost painted this like bad picture of like the relationship between me and my mom, and like there's this tension and stuff. And honestly, like even thinking back, I think that there was the advice episode where I mentioned that like, oh, it's those who love you and those who know you best. And for all intents and purposes, I paint like my mom doesn't know me, and to an extent that's kind of true, but not due to any fault of her own. Frankly, it was a communication breakdown almost entirely on my end, where I was kind of just withholding that information and just trying to like, I was trying to figure things out and not have her worry about it, because she takes care of my sister, she takes care of grandma, she takes care of a lot of other things. And I'm like, look, I'm gonna be okay. Like, and I just don't want you to have to worry about another thing, you know? Like, I will land where I land, but no, I'm gonna be all right. So I just want to like come out and like say that, because I realize in like editing all the podcasts and listening back that I've realized I've painted that picture. And honestly, like we're still close. It's just, it's a communication thing that I'm still working on to this day, and I'm just, you know, overall getting better. So she's always saw me as the getting back to the story, she always saw me as like mechanical engineering, like the, you know, and I do enjoy it, and I love the idea of it, and I will continue it as a hobby. Like, I want to learn more about like aerodynamics, and because one of my main passions and one of the things that I watch religiously, and now I brought the wifey into it, which is awesome, is Formula One. And I just love the technical aspects of Formula One, and this notion of downforce, and all the intricacies of the aerodynamics. And so it's like, unfortunately, there's really no great resource other than school for like learning those things. But then it kind of clicked in my head, oh, hey, I can always on the side look at airplanes, because effectively they're very similar in terms of the aerodynamics at play, just literally in the inverse. Rather than lift, you're looking at downforce. So it's like, at least learning those principles, that way I can understand Formula One a little bit better. So it's like, I always know that I'm going to pursue that as a hobby, but as a career, it really stumped me, because I was like, okay, well, crap. I'm here at this at community college here, this junior college, and I no longer want to do mechanical engineering. What the hell do I want to do? So I looked internally, took a couple classes. At one point, I wanted to be a forensic analyst, because I love like detective work and stuff, and just piecing together puzzles and stuff, which
something we obviously all love.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I I enjoy it. So I do enjoy it quite a bit. Puzzles are my favorite thing. So I tried going down that route. I was like, it's not as lucrative as it comes off to be. You know, CSI and NCIS kind of oversell it a little bit. And I'm just like, I'm okay. I if I can not look at a dead body, I'm okay. So then after that, I wanted to do chemistry, because I still love like the idea of elements, and that's part of the inspiration for the bromium thing, where it's designed to be like the lost element, right? So that was always something that I found a passion with, but it was weird, because I'm like, okay, that I kind of like it, but not really. It's at least not to pursue it as a career. And then that's where it kind of fell into this thing where I was looking at like my family, and I realized a lot, especially on my mom's side, and like my grandma's like brothers, like all of his lineage, pretty much like the majority of them run their own businesses. I like to have their own businesses. I'm like, so I'm just like, you know, like I feel like I know a lot about running a business and like the concepts, but let me see if that's something that I might enjoy. So I took a couple classes, and I think it was financial accounting of all things that I think really solidified my love of business, where you're looking at financial statements, you're seeing how much money, how much the revenue, what's the, you know, all the numbers, and it really just clicked that I love and enjoy just this constant, I don't know, uphill battle of how to grow a company and how to grow business and the marketing of it. And that's kind of where I ended up kind of just falling in, and that's where I kind of went full on. And I know on the podcast I've said I've been studying to do data analytics. And the idea is that eventually I'd like to be either a marketing analyst or a business analyst, to use all those data points and stuff to be able, and along with the domain knowledge that you learn from school and the business and the marketing and stuff, to be able to help companies grow. Like that is the ultimate overall play. And it took me like 6 years of school at the community college level, which is part of the reason why I am like so thankful that I went that route, because had I gone to a 4-year, oh boy, that would be debt up the wazoo, right? So that was kind of like my journey. The nice thing is that my mom and grandma I've always been like my grandma's favorite. Like, she hasn't been shy about that. But she always said, look, I didn't get to do it with much other people, but because you're, like, obviously I'm her favorite, she's like, look, I just want to make sure that if you do go to, pursue a 4-year degree, that I cover your education no matter what. So having gone through the community college route to save them a bundle for sure. And she's always like, covered the bill, and I'm absolutely thankful for. And even now, as I transition to the 4-year university, it's not that expensive by comparison to especially other universities that it could have gone to. And it's a decent university as well, which is awesome. So I will end up getting some debt, but at the same time, like I said, my mother said she should be covering it. It shouldn't be as bad as other people who, like, I want to say it was not my stepbrother, my brother-in-law, I think, had a pretty hefty bill after college. But yeah, that was kind of my journey, my path through the higher education system. So, not sure if either of you have questions or if I did cover something or over-covered something.
That was
you covered
quite
a
a
lot.
journey. Yeah.
It was, and that's a short version. If you subscribe to us on Patreon, you get the uncut version.
And you'll help pay for his school.
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but
It's okay. It's what I'm here for.
But yeah, so that was my journey, and I thought now we can revisit the question: do you think most people should attend college/university? Why or why not?
Only if they know what they're going for and have decided that's what they want in life.
I am of a different opinion. I think you should try higher education just to see if you like it, though. Like, just try it before you knock it, sort of thing. Start out at community college.
Yeah,
Don't waste all your money. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe I fall in line with that. So here's the thing: if you know for sure that you're just like, it ain't for me, I mean, maybe don't bother, frankly, But if you're maybe like on the fence of like, should I, shouldn't I? Community college, the 2-year college, the cheaper college, frankly, is so hard to beat. And a lot of times you can get amazing professors that are, working at these colleges, and you're paying at least, in some cases you'd be paying a very budget amount for a same education as you would at a 4-year institution. So
Yeah.
it's like, I've always been of the mind of like, try it, It's cheap.
Unless you know what you want to do already and you're just absolutely certain of it, then
Yeah.
either don't go to college, go to university, or go to a trade school. Like that's an option.
My biggest concern with like going to school just to see if you like school, I think there's a lot of pressure for a lot of people that come from outside forces, parents, society, teachers, friends. I regret going to school right out of high school.
Mhm.
It was dumb. It was a waste of a year. It was pointless. I could have been doing so many other things. And even just to like, my schooling was paid for, so even just trying out that year was a waste of time for me. Like it was, right? And there is also the problem of like a lot of the times when you first go to school, it's all general education. It's all just high school over again for the most part, which is what a lot of people end up doing. Because like no one goes with the expectation of being in school for 6 years, 8 years. I think a lot of people end up that way because they quote unquote like they switch gears, they find what they want to love like 2 or 3 years into the line. I feel like most people are better off taking time off, thinking about what it is that they love. And if that means going to a community college and trying out a couple classes that aren't necessarily general education, that's fine. But like I like from the age of 18 to 19 discovered so many things about myself now that I wasn't tied to high school. And I try like the minute I started the job that we all worked together, I found a passion and love for technology that I didn't know existed. And I wouldn't have gotten that from school. I literally went to a technical school. You know, I went to DeVry, which is known for their computer science degrees. And I had none of that. I even was in a class specifically for technology, and I was like, this sucks. I hate this. And then I went to the work that we did in the computer store, and I was like, oh, cool. There's so many facets that I love. There's so many things that I love. And it wasn't school that taught me that. It was real life and work. And I don't know. I think it's a matter of talking to people and discovering yourself out in the world and not confined within school again. Because I feel like going directly from high school to college just feels like high school 2.0, especially community college. You just get to pick when your classes are. That's my only concern with saying that. I think it's a better option for people who are more mature. Like I think if I was 21 and I went back to community college and I like felt things out and if college was right for me, or even 20, even taking a year off from high school to community college, I think I would have been like, is this right for me? And then make a decision. Because when I went to community college the second time, I was more in that mindset. I was more in the mindset of like, is schooling right for me? I think I took a video production class and I took I think it was a general English class. And I just realized like, I was like, this doesn't like this. None of this does it for me. But it definitely wasn't the first year of school. I was more focused on, let me be independent and be out there and be an adult.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I still am a proponent of the gap year, of taking at least a year off, go into the real world, see if you, like I said, do that discovery of, hey, especially if you're unsure, you know, take that time off, try and discover yourself a little bit more, do a little bit of travel, or, you know, go into the real world and the working world and get a job and see if that's something for you. And then if you realize pretty much whatever you end up finding out from that self-discovery, then going in and saying, okay, if you want to go to a university or a college, then pursuing the community college route, just because I guess you know, unless you're absolutely dead set sure that's what you want to do. Either way, I'm still a huge fan of the community college route, just because you're saving a bundle. Frankly.
Sure. I mean, if you've determined school is something you want to explore, then community college is absolutely the way to go. Absolutely. But I think that gap year is important. And try, if you have an idea of where you want to do and what you want to do in that year, try and get a job as adjacent to that field as possible, so that way you can kind of see what it's like in the real life. Like, I did improv right out of high school. Like, I found an improv team, I joined something, and I got to talk to people who do acting for a living. And I really got to determine how I felt about it and improv as a whole and that whole field, and obviously I was able to determine very easily, you don't got to go to school for this. Not that I didn't already kind of know, but like,
just reinforced what you already knew.
It reinforced it, and it showed it in a more realistic light for me. Because these are the actual people who are pursuing the career that I wanted to quote unquote do. And I got to see what it's not all like. You look at acting and you think of Brad Pitt and you think of Angelina Jolie and you think of, all these big people.
You leave Brangelina out of this, okay?
But for every Brad Pitt, there is 1,000 people that are just trying to audition for a commercial and maybe get like a couple gigs a year and do some background work and are able to make a kind of decent life out of it. But it is a drudge, and you got to be ready for that.
And if you're really lucky, you can be that one extra guy that's in everything.
Yeah, I know this guy. He is such a phenomenal man. And every once in a while, I'll catch him on the background of a TV show, and I'm always so excited about it. He is the best. He's one of the best improvisers I know. He's the sweetest dude and a great teacher, but he makes most of his money through teaching improv and help running a improv camp. And the acting stuff is kind of almost secondary to all that. Wonderful man, though. God, I miss him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that gap year is really important. And it's also a maturity thing. Because going from high school to college, I think a lot of people have that problem of distinguishing it from more high school kid stuff to this is the real world. Get ready for the real world, because I promise you it's different.
Yeah, I definitely think if you don't have your stuff together, or at least are relatively mature and aren't just going to go to just because you have that outside force of, oh, well, mom said I got to go, right? But maybe take that year off and take a bit deeper look.
And only go for you.
Yeah.
Only go for you. If you're going for someone else, you have wasted your time.
Yeah, that much I can agree with. Because, yeah, it's your life at the end of the day.
Like, there is a lot of social pressure. I know there's a ton of it. I still feel it to this day. Like, I feel like a dumber human. I feel like a lesser human compared to people who have degrees. Because there is that like weird social stigma of like, if you didn't go to college, you're kind of just worthless. And I feel it. I feel it all the time.
The funniest thing is that like I feel like you're a crap ton smarter and like way more stable than like half the people that I've been going to school with.
Sure.
Like
I know that I'm at least a little bit above average of human intelligence, but also at the same time, like I feel like an idiot and I feel like I don't deserve to be where I am, even though I know I've worked and I've gotten lucky to knowing the right people, but I've worked towards my current trajectory.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Anything else to add? Either of you? Not really.
No.
They shake their heads. Alrighty. Well, let's move on a little here. Let's let's pound the nail in the coffin a little bit more as to why college sucks. And look at some stats.
I don't think any of us think that college sucks.
Well,
It's just not for everybody.
I still agree it sucks, but
Well, okay. Current U.S. college does suck for a lot of reasons.
and here are 4 of them. So, one of the recent, and this is a common thread that we're seeing, and especially when you don't find your purpose in life and you don't find what you want to do, this is kind of what ends up being the result. I think it was a 2010 study that found that only 27% of college grads are working in a field similar to what they graduated in. Part of that stems from either you are doing it for someone else, like family pressure or social pressure, or you did it, maybe you didn't quite know what it entailed, and then you realize, not really for me, but you already have the degree, you know?
There's also a problem of a lot of degrees not leading to a lot of jobs.
Looking at you, liberal arts degrees.
And unfortunately, a lot of like English degrees, history degrees, like other language degrees can fortunately lead to some a little bit more lucrative positions, but like some of like the general education stuff doesn't like help a lot.
Yeah.
Unless you want to become a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, though, like how many, that's not exactly, I mean, there's a lot of people lined up for that when they realize there's not many other jobs in their field. But at least for me, like that's part of the reason why I did business, because even as things shift in the business world, it's not going anywhere. Capitalism, baby. Like it's business is going to be there forever, just like electrical engineering going to be there for engineering in general. STEM really is going to be there forever. Acting it's going to be there forever. Has been there forever, frankly.
But you just don't need a degree for it.
Right. Exactly.
So you need experience.
You just find those places that are going to be there. And we'll move on to the next stat. 41% of recent college grads are working in jobs that don't require degrees. And that was a more recent study. I think it was last year that study came out. So it's like we're getting the most degrees of anyone before. Granted, population-wise, a little bit more, but even percentages, we're still getting more degrees than previous generations, yet we're working in places that don't actually require a degree. Here is the student debt statistic. It was found, I think it was 2019 or 2018, 56% of college grads had some form of student debt, with the average debt being $28,800.
That's a lot less than I thought it was going to be.
Well, you hear about the big ones, lawyers and doctors, and their insane costs.
The average person, 250,000. Yeah.
Well, I meant the percentage.
Like, oh yeah.
I didn't mean like the average debt. I meant the percentage of people in debt. Only half, or approximately half, seems kind of low. I feel like most people, especially with how expensive schools are, 4 years specifically, I figured that would be a lot higher. Because the majority of Americans don't have like the $400 it costs to repair a car. So let alone the money it takes to pay off school.
So it was found that at private institutions, the percentage of people with debt was like insanely high. I think it was like in the 70 percentile. But public education, just because especially we're starting to see more subsidies and cheaper college tuition, I think is where it's starting to like trickle it down a little bit. I think it was in the 40 percentile range, but the average for all college grads. That was 56%. Also, this is grads, not necessarily people who attend college, which I
Fair.
imagine that number would be
Mm.
astronomical by comparison.
Yeah,
But yeah,
a lot of people drop out just because they can't afford it.
yeah, exactly. So that's what that statistic doesn't take into consideration.
My mom's still paying off her debt. And she
Yeah.
went to school. The funny thing is, she went to DeVry for computer sciences. Nowhere. And then she went to school for education and then started working on her master's for education. Guess what she does right now?
Non-educate?
She an accountant?
She's an accountant that she does not have a degree for. She's a controller. Like, she's a controller. She can be, at least, or that's what she was in her previous job until she moved and now does general accounting. But like,
Yeah.
If the proof isn't in the pudding where she's still paying off her education degrees, but is not in either of the fields. Now, mind you, she was a preschool teacher for a very long time, but even still.
Right. Yeah. And just looking at an example like that, this was like a pretty big deal because I think even one of the high execs at Google talked about it. This next stat is 50% of the workforce, the current workforce, will need some sort of retraining to learn new skills by 2025. And that is part of the reason why they released their career certificates to try and help aid in those high growth areas. So, yeah, the 5 I think that they have is UX design, but pretty much UI design. Android development.
UX is more than UI.
Okay, UX. Okay, so UX design, Android development, IT, project management, and data analytics. So those are the 5 that they're seeing high growth areas that will require at least some sort of retooling and education that they'll need. So which is why they're offering those certificates. And yeah, that's kind of how I stumbled across it. Because they already had the Android in their IT, which all got great reviews. Those kind of I think that was their test bed, and then they released the other 3 earlier this year to try and help with the retraining. And this is something. There was a TED talk from a man, Jason Shen, who worked at Etsy. It's a short little talk, but in it he highlights this notion that when you're applying for jobs, and on the opposite side, when you're trying to hire, we need to focus more on highlighting your ability and not your experience. Because you can have, especially you have those jobs that are like, oh, yeah, you need 5 years of experience, even though it's an entry-level job in the field, whatever field it is. And it's like, well, how do you expect anyone to fill it, right? You're missing that potential of someone who might honestly be like the next prodigy in whatever area that is, but just because they don't have 5 years of experience, they're going to go to a competitor maybe. You never know, right? And it really reinforces this notion of like those companies that are looking at those specific schools, like, oh, let me just look at Harvard, right? What if there was that person that went to Yale that's like 10 times better than half the people that went to Harvard that year? So it's like he's trying to break that notion of if you're trying to grow and trying to expand and having the exact same pool of people that you keep trying to rehire and it's not working out, maybe you should start looking elsewhere. So I know one of the popular things right now is you have work samples where, let's say, for instance, in data analytics, they'll give you a data set and they'll say, hey, give me your insights. It shows that by doing these work samples, it's infinitely a better metric to tell how they're going to do on the job than their experience. Because they can have a ton of experience, but still be crappy at the job. you know. So it's like it's kind of crazy how I know that wasn't necessarily college per se, but it's something to think about because most people tend to go to college to go into a specific field, and it's like you have to remember, don't just focus on getting experience all the time, but focus on what your ability and what you can do. Because if you're able to just wow them while not having the experience, chances of getting the job are a lot higher. And that might be a conversation for a different day too, like looking for jobs and stuff.
I feel like this is related in that when you come out of college with a degree and you start looking for a job, your degree counts as years of experience. An associate's is a 2-year degree and it counts as 2 years of experience. Bachelor's, it's another 2 years. That's 4 years. It just keeps adding. Like, when a requirement says 5 years of experience, one, like the hiring manager probably didn't ask for someone with 5 years of experience if they're saying it's an entry level position. It's like an HR thing. But two, if you have the degree that's probably also in the requirements, that's 4 years. You're only off by 1. That's negligible. Just apply for it.
But I mean, and even still though, but he, in the terms of what people are putting down and what hiring managers are looking for, he's right. Like you need to, and even when it comes down to interviewing, right? Stop interviewing, start auditioning. Start proving your abilities within the interview if you can, right? And I know that doesn't apply to all positions, but there's a lot of stuff within the industry of film and production and all of that they want to see a portfolio, or they want to see a video resume or something along those lines. You build a I forget what it's called, but basically a docket of your work. There's a specific
highlight reel sort of thing.
Portfolio is what I've heard a lot of, at least in the data analytics field.
Portfolio, they use a different term within film. Reel, I think, is closest. It's your reel. That's used a lot. And I mean, a lot of acting jobs is strictly like, yo, come here, show me that you can do it. Cool, you can do it. You look the part, let's go. You know? And if more jobs and more interviewees embrace that type of thinking, you might find more people, even if they don't necessarily have years of experience, or even people who have a million years of experience but aren't how you want to work with them, or really don't understand it. They clearly have found themselves in a position and were lucky enough to be in that position long enough to really fit into the job. I think is a better way to think of it as an interviewer and an interviewee. Start proving you know what you're doing and it can fit within their lines in the midst of your interview.
And that's the other thing too. I don't know if you were doing this, Kev, because obviously you're the one who's looking for jobs.
I'm
recently.
not looking.
Well, you were.
Yes. Yes.
Tailoring your resume to that position that you're applying for. That's a huge thing that, like, I don't know why it never clicked in my head like a lot sooner, but within the last couple of places that I've been applying to, I've always looked at what verbiage they're using, look at what they're doing, and okay, how does my previous experience fit within that category? For instance, for me, I was doing a lot of like marketing and technical support, sure. But when I think about it, in terms of data analytics, well, let's see. I'm having conversations with people. I'm gathering that data. I'm looking for patterns and trends if there's something defective with a specific part, and then highlighting that, replicating it, and logging that data and forwarding over that information to the necessary parties to look into it further. I am analyzing data, right? So it's like, it's finding those correlations and those gaps to not necessarily lie on your resume. You should never lie. Can maybe bolster your case a little bit better by finding those relationships and finding those ways to adapt, your current and previous experience into whatever role or career or even in education if you're applying for like law school or like medical school, finding those ways to like adapt that to put yourself in a better position.
Yeah, that's really important. Have
All right.
you like considered cover letters? That teaches you that really quickly. But yeah, I agree. Job searching should be another discussion.
Before we get way too into resumes, I feel like obviously that'll be a topic of a podcast later on. So why don't we get back into school? Do we want to hear from our audience?
Yes, but
Always.
first, I'm gonna leave you with a piece of advice. This is kind of something that we've all covered, right? And this is tailored toward you high school grads a little bit more because you haven't made that decision yet for whether or not you want to pursue higher education. Or even if you're not a high school grad and you just aren't sure or on the fence of, hey, should I go back to school? You know, the piece of advice that I have, and it actually lines up pretty close to what the photographer says in the audience responses. Don't spend the next few years pursuing an education or a career in an area just to fulfill someone's expectation of you. Rather, figure out what you're good at and what you like to do. And if you can find a way to get paid to do that, do it. Absolutely love that quote. But yeah, so with that said, let's get into our audience responses. We don't have too many this week because this guy dropped the ball quite a bit, but that's fine. We'll get into it next week a little bit better here with making sure I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do and what I committed to myself to do and the podcast itself. So we'll start with our first one here. This is Kelly, as always, chiming in with, I believe. Oh, so let me actually say what the actual prompt this week was. Give us your view on college/university, and then give us any questions if you have any questions for us. So her thoughts about college and university and higher education was, I believe higher education is only beneficial to those who picked out the right major. Otherwise, it's mostly a waste of time. It's highly probable that if I, Kelly, had stuck with what I wanted to do originally, which was cosmetology and aesthetics, I would probably be a lot happier. I'm not sure if it's our generation that suffers with it, but it's very hard out there to find a job that you went to school for, as we saw in the statistics. That lines up. There are some ridiculous requirements, like 5 years of previous experience, even though it's an entry-level job, as I mentioned. It makes it impossible for a newly graduated student to get in. An example of this was my cousin who loved marine life. She would volunteer at the local aquarium and end up going to school for marine biology. Eventually, she realized that it was difficult to find a job with that major, and she ended up dropping out. She then started her own business and has been super successful ever since. She even agreed with me in saying that college is a waste of time. So she does have a question for us, and I think we've already kind of answered it. But did you guys, feel any outside pressure to go to college? If so, who or what were they? So we pretty much talked on it. For me, it was definitely my mother and society.
I mean, the same. My parents and the thought of I would be worthless in the eyes of society if I didn't go to college. So
yeah, I didn't deal with the societal stress as much as you guys did, despite having that same like situation. Everyone else going to college that I knew. But yeah, I mean, a lot of pressure from my parents.
Yeah, for me, it was one of those where, like, in APs, especially senior year, we're sitting there like, oh yeah, I'm going to here, oh, I'm going there, and then they ask me, where are you going? I'm like, like, I couldn't even answer. Like, I remember at one point I was put on the spot, and I'm just like, yes, like, it was not entirely great, but at least in that regard. But yeah, so that was the outside pressure that we felt. So thank you for the question and the response. The last one we have here is at the photographer. He says, I personally have 2 degrees, a bachelor's in commercial photography and a master's in technology management. This was roughly 7 years of schooling. At first I thought it was great, but now that I look back in life, I'm in debt and not even working in that field I originally went to school for. Shocking. I look back on it and have to say that yes, the whole college experience was great, especially for me since I'm more of an introvert. It taught me a lot about myself, opened me up to new experiences and areas in life, and I met new people, which some people really benefit from in life. But if I were to go back and talk to my younger self, I would tell him to go to a trade school or maybe a cooking school. It's not really worth the stress and debt. In today's world, if you want to make money, I personally believe for most cases, trade schools are the way to go. However, we still need doctors and teachers. Those and a few other career paths still require college or university in the end. Today, I do regret my decisions. Here's my piece of advice to all the listeners and to anyone wanting to pursue higher education. Do what you want to do. Don't let anyone force you to go to a certain school or career path. In the end, it's your life, your future. Just find something you're passionate about. A job is something you dread going to every day. A career is when you have fun and enjoy it. If you can have fun while working, you found the right place. Just pretty much reverberating the previous piece of advice. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much one of those where if you can find a way to have fun and get paid, awesome.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, awesome. So that's going to wrap it up for this longer episode of higher education. Frankly, it's not as long as I thought it was going to be, so I'm happy with that. I was entirely anticipating this to be a two-parter, but we'll just put it out there as a longer singular episode. So before we get wrapped up, let me do our little plugs for the podcast. If you enjoy this conversation and want more, you can follow us on social media at Audible Anomaly. And if you have any questions or want to join the conversation, whenever we do these little email social blasts, you can find us on the socials, or if you want to be a bit more private and discreet about it, you can always email us at audibleanomaly@gmail.com. All right, gentlemen, what are you guys working on? Any plugs you want to put in there?
As always, you can find me on twitch.tv/DPRLTron, DPRLTRON. We have a fun time. We get a little wacky wild. You can see more of my comedy side shine. So if you like that idea, come join us there. I do stream all the time. It's a lot of fun.
Kevin?
Yep. I have no plugs. My ears are not even pierced.
There you go. And for me, you can find me at Bromium404 on YouTube and at Bromium wherever you get your social media. All links are in the description. Next week, I thought it'd be nice to take a little step back and just answer a bunch of your questions. So if you have any questions, shoot them at us, like I mentioned, at Audible Anomaly on the social medias or at audibleanomaly@gmail.com. So we look forward to hearing from you and answering all your questions. Until then, we've been Audible Anomaly, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye!